Welcome everyone to the next installment of interviewing interesting people in the world of wireless. My name is John Fasella. Most of you know me, not everybody. I'm past president of RCA. Tonight we're going to interview John Pelson. For those of you that have been regulars, we interviewed John last fall to talk about his book, which was about 5G and the security threats that are created in a 5G world. But we're going to talk about something completely different. And actually, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about how a startup can be successful in the world of wireless. And I pegged John for this because he has, I think, uniquely qualified because he has worked for some large companies and now he's working for a small science-based startup. So he'll give us those insights for about 15 minutes. And then the second 15 minutes, I have some questions for him in his current company, which is security-based, wireless security-based. And I'm very, very intrigued to hear what he's going to say about that. This is a slight departure from, normally we don't talk too much about companies, but more about technology. But in this case, John has sworn on a stack of something that he will keep it as generic as possible. So we'll see. And as usual, in the second half hour, we will have questions from the audience, and RCA's counsel, Barney Scholl, will field those questions and send those as appropriate to John. For those of you that are watching that are not RCA members, I would heavily encourage you to join. RCA, our new motto is fostering wireless innovation. And that's what we do. And we've been doing that for over 100 years. If you join us, where your money goes basically is to help youth and those that are currently in the wireless industry to improve their careers. We have a mentorship program. We have a scholarship program. We encourage women in wireless. And in fact, there's going to be a panel at IWCE on that. So we would welcome you to join RCA. It's a very nominal amount of money and you'll be contributing to the industry. Okay, saw a nice comment that somebody had read your book, so that's great. So, John, although we interviewed last year, could you give us a brief bio of yourself for those that weren't there or need a refresher?
Sure. I am I've had a long career in the wireless industry, starting with Lucent Technology back about close to 30 years ago now. Rode that up in the heyday, in the boom years, and back down in the bust. And since then, I've worked with carriers and equipment makers. British Telecom, I ran the convergence strategy for BT, and came back to the US, worked with Nextel and JDS Uniphase. And my focus has always been on disruptive and discontinuous technology. So I was not the guy coming in on the 3G base station to find a way to cut power consumption by 8%. I'd be the guy that they'd say, you know, I think we can do data over wireless too. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. And that was, for me, that was always a fun place to be, which was taking new things, especially when you're working with places like Bell Labs and Lucent, where there was just brilliant technology being invented, but typically the marketing and the packaging and the sale of this technology was really the challenge, because you had smart people invent stuff, and I would tease the guys in the labs. I'd sit down and say, okay, this is going to be the 120s helping the 180s guys, so listen to me for a change, and I'm going to try and tell you how to do something. And it was a terrific career. When I stopped to write, I decided to write a book about 3-4 years ago, and I didn't even have a topic picked. I settled finally on, they say write what you know, and I'd done a lot of writing, but never professionally. Certainly never written a book. But the topic I settled on back in the winter of 2019, in the end of the year, was 5G, Huawei, and how the Chinese giants had really wiped out the American equipment industry, the industry that invented telecom, invented wireless telecom, certainly, Motorola, Nortel, Lucent. And my timing was good. Right after I got my publishing contract, COVID struck. And suddenly the idea that I was challenging the reliance on China, and I've been a globalist. I think, international free trade I'm a big fan. But I was arguing that this was not really trade we were engaged with in China. This was more of a contentious environment. Everyone wasn't just trying to get rich, which is, Korea, Germany, Japan, these are commercial competitions. And what I argued in wireless wars is this is actually war by other means. And the threat to Taiwan, the threat to Hong Kong, the threat to the Uyghur population in the Western provinces was all very real and important for us. And we shouldn't treat this as just another tech endeavor. So I wrote the book and really went on to a lot of fun advising government officials and Department of Commerce, the intelligence agencies, the Pentagon on issues that, curiously, for someone who didn't have a background in any of that, the point was that the war was being fought in a business theater. And I actually knew more about that than much better educated people who knew China and knew global politics. But the point was, that's not where this is happening. This is playing out in the business arena, and that's kind of insights that would be more helpful right now.
That's great. Okay, John, thank you. So, because you've worked for both large and small companies, as we said before, you have a unique view on the challenges. Could we start off with talking about the challenges of working in a larger company in the wireless space?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems, the benefits are pretty clear, especially when you have a place with a legacy like Lucent and Bell Labs. The downsides, I talked about how Lucent was building a golf course back in the mid 90s. It got up to about $70 million or so. Company money, beautiful course, by the way, Hamilton Farm up in New Jersey. If you get a chance to play it, I highly recommend it, but it's not really the best way to spend a shareholder's money. And so you get a kind of an agent principal separation where you'll have people spending the money. It's not their money, and there's not a deep feeling of ownership for whose money it is. And so you can get some bad behaviors. I think at BT, you saw more of a typical problem for the big companies. I had a friend who lived just north of London in a town called Bishop Stortford, which is kind of a classically British name. And he said, John, you got to help me. You're at BT. And I live in the neighborhood of the future. They built our whole neighborhood wired with fiber optics. And this is around 2001, 2002. He said, this is state of the art, but BT doesn't have fiber to our neighborhood. And he said, the only way they can connect us to the internet is with dial-up modems. I'm getting 14.4 on my connection speed. Forget DSL, forget anything. I'm literally on a fiber optic that's capable of like 1 terabyte. And I got to do the handshake, and I'm getting they say we're going to go to 28.8 soon. So he told me about this. When I walked it into our CEO's office, Ben Verwyen, who had hired me, he had been my boss at Lucent, and he was now the CEO of British Telecom. And he took this and he raised the issue. He talked about it at a senior leadership meeting. We did what we could, and nothing ever changed. Company kind of looked at this, tried that, launched an initiative, filed a request, nothing. And I told my friend, all I can do is the CEO knows about your problem. He's trying to fix it, and he can't get the right groups to do what they need to do to fix this. And that was how that ended up for them.
So that's your story of big companies. I hear you. I work for two. But your current company is a smaller company. So could you now contrast the challenges of working in a smaller company in wireless, please, John?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems, of course, is just getting heard, getting noticed. Whether you have a disruptive technology or a cheaper solution to a known technology, the presence is always going to be limited. And if you're in the wireless and the technology industry, there's a lot of money. There's big players. There's certainly, because of, I think, the capital barriers to entry. You tend to get big established companies with big budgets. So that's certainly one of the problems is getting your name out there. And the media, as you know, the telecom media certainly isn't what it used to be. There used to be a dozen publications. People read them, and you'd get a relationship with the editors and the reporters, and people would find out about you. Now there's, in a way, there's only a couple, and in a way, there's 1,000. You got every blog, every newsletter, and so it's much harder to get people to see what you're doing. You got to work hard to make yourself noticed.
I think that's a really good point because I lived in the earlier time when there were a handful of publications, and if you reached out to them, you knew that just about everybody in the wireless world was reading one of them. But now, like you say, the blogs are endless, actually. Um, so, how does a smaller company get into growth mode, in an industry like wireless that's so busy, and especially when the company's technology is either new or relatively unknown? How do you get that attention with all those blogs and the distractions of every day?
What I'm in a company filled with people that are experts in government and intel and military and certainly in technology, but not in business so much. And the kind of things that I'm trying to explain to them is demos, PowerPoint slides are not the answer. Demos, surprisingly, are not really the answer. You can show something that would blow people away. But what I explain is you show that to them and they go, yeah, okay, great. Let me see it actually in action. And you have people say, well, this will work anywhere. Well, yeah, but it's a demo, and demos can be misleading. And if you're at a big established company, you have some hotshot company come and say, look what we can do. And say, yeah, in the conference room, you demoed it. It looks like it works. Deploy it. So, well, that's easier said than done, isn't it? So to actually do a deployment, I've really tried to make the point, and I think it's understood in my company, that the people that like the shiny objects, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm.
Mm.
The innovators and the early adopters love the technology. They want to see the shiny object. They want to know how you're doing it. Demos are fantastic, and they don't have budgets. They're not innovators don't write $1 billion checks to anybody. They don't write $1 million checks for the most part. So you have to get to the early mainstream, and that's how you grow a company and get up that steep curve. The people in the early mainstream don't want a demo. They want to see it working. They want to say, I'll take what he's got because he's kicking my butt now. They don't say, I'll take what you're selling because I believe in your vision. Big companies aren't believing in visions and writing big checks and deploying their networks on that.
That's really good advice. I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore, and way back when I was in my startup mode, I found that his book was unique in actually explaining what happens. And I think most startup companies don't understand any of that stuff. So um, it's good that you mentioned that. By the way, in Marty Cooper's book, Cutting the Cord, he talked a lot about the demonstrations they had to do for the FCC and the frustrations thereof. So yeah, demo mode is difficult. By the way, before I ask the next question, I want to give a shout out to Ray Weber, who, believe it or not, is in South Africa watching this at 3 a.m. in the morning. So God bless people like Ray Weber that are regulars on this channel, so to speak. Okay, let's talk a little bit about patents versus trade secrets. Um, there's pros and cons to both. Maybe you could quickly outline those, John, and talk a little bit about, in your experience, which made the most sense, both for your earlier companies, the larger ones, and for the current company.
Yeah, and I was just explaining, I was doing a briefing for a group from the intelligence community, and I said, when China's stealing IP, and understand, by the way, the people that I've been working with in dealing with the challenges from the PRC, and the Chinese Communist Party, a high number of them are Chinese people, people that have either came through Hong Kong or Taiwan. In fact, one of them is from the Uyghur region, and she's helped lead the fight against the oppression. So this is not an anti-China thing. This is an anti-Chinese Communist Party thing, which anyone who pays attention should be on board with. A significant number of the forces allied in the U.S. are Chinese themselves. But I said think about this, the theft of intellectual property. If you're ideologically a communist, then you don't believe in the idea of personal property. Well, intellectual property is just a form of property, and it's there for the taking. So the idea of filing a patent and expecting it to be respected, if someone doesn't believe in personal property as a thing, it's not going to be respected, and that certainly is much of what we've seen. The interesting thing with the company I'm with now is that there's a difference between the patent filing and the art and the know-how. And in fact, the first question I asked, I said, who's doing it? This is a company, and I'll talk about it hopefully a little bit later, but this is a company that has a major, big idea. It's a deep tech, big breakthrough company. And I said, who's doing your IP protection? And please don't tell me it's your brother-in-law who just passed the bar and is learning how to file patents, because they will eat your lunch. And forget China, Qualcomm, Intel, Apple, and everyone else will be using this technology, and you'll be raising $10 million for legal representation, not for engineering work. And the answer is Cooley, who is, I think, one of the best patent firms in the world. And I was pleased to hear that. So the patents are filed well. But when I ask, all right, so you file the patent, they can go pull it now, read what we're doing. And the answer is that there's so much art. And not only is there art in the head of the founders, but they've built a team that is being trained in certain ways so that they contribute in their own ways. And someone who doesn't have this dynamic kind of engagement would have a very hard time kind of ripping this off. And, we had a talk with someone from the government who said, this is cool, but can I reverse engineer this? And our founder said, no. I thought, oh, that's not a good answer. And then he continued, he said, you couldn't reverse engineer this. China could, and so could Russia. Iran probably could. It would take maybe 50 to 100,000 hours of really top-notch scientists, but everything, right from an ASIC chip, anything can be reverse engineered. But what he said was, when you're done, it's a really good day when the enemy, the opposition, has reverse engineered 98% of your product, and they think they've got it 100%. It's like the Invisible Man, but you can see his outlines, and he doesn't know that. So he's walking around thinking no one can see him, but you can spot enough to know where he is. So it's the art around that IP for deep tech, at least, is really important. And you can steal some of it, but you can't really take it all.
So your feeling is that the art makes up enough of the important stuff that the patents don't hurt you, if I'm reading you right.
That's the view, and it's always a tough decision. Everything you file, my understanding of how we've gone about it, and I think it's typical, is you file just enough to have something that's defensible, and not a bit more, because anything else beyond that gets them further down their own path. And you don't want to be in litigation. Nobody wins. If you're suing someone who's ripped off your IP, then you lose. Even if you win, you lose.
And this industry is full of that history, and most of us know that. Armstrong and DeForest and the others. So one last question in this general direction, John. My experience has been that smaller companies have very smart founders. They're often geniuses, but they usually have little to no business experience. So how do you convince them that they need somebody like yourself or someone else to come along with the business experience to guide the whole thing towards a successful conclusion? Because it's not always just about technology.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And so the two founders of the company are an extreme example of what you're talking about. One of them was a PhD theoretical physicist, string theory focus, and he explained to me what happened to the string theory field, where he said the way he put it to me was the field was divided between is the answer to this question one or is the answer to this question two? He simplified it for me, which I was grateful for. He said, is it one or is it two? Is it one? And they used the particle colliders and the hadron, and they spent $1 billion to do an experiment to find out if it was one or if it was two, and then the field was going to go charging down that path. And after all those years, it came back and it was 1.5. And he said, we all looked at each other and said, have a nice day. Good knowing you. Enjoy your career, whatever it's going to be from this point on, because string theory's over. So he looked at teaching. He ended up joining a government agency that needed really, really, really smart people that would do breakthrough work. And the co-founder was a computer scientist, electrical engineer, had kind of a similar background, brilliant guy, also went to the same agency. And he said, next thing you know, we're jumping out of planes with guns. And we're hoping people do missions because there was stuff we were deploying that was so sophisticated, you needed the inventors doing it. So instead of whiteboarding back at the office, which we did for the first few years, developing algorithms, we were deploying gear. And they came up with their breakthrough, which, if I were to summarize it, is a way of making radio communications uninterceptable and, in fact, unfindable. And they came back and they worked this up, and they hired a professor out at Arizona to vet this and say, did we just come up with what we think we did? And he said, you have. You've bumped up against Shannon's limit. This is what you're doing is at the theoretical limits of what physics is going to allow in radio comms. And they said, all right, we're not business people. And they went out and hired a CEO, which was an unusual thing. I asked him, I said, did the investors bring you in? He said, there weren't investors yet. These two guys said, you've run companies. Can you help us raise the money, help us find an office, get a lease? We don't know any of this stuff. So this was a very unusual situation. Out of the 75 people, I'd say 45 or so are scientists, physicists, mathematicians, and engineers. There's a very small group of business people in this company, maybe the right ratio, but we're trying to explain that even this kind of breakthrough visionary technology doesn't sell itself. You still have to position it. You have to find the right landing, the Jeffrey Moore, the bowling alley where you knock over that lead pin and that knocks over all the other pins after that. Because if you try to do everything at once, you'll be sitting in a bar someday, swilling your drink saying, you know, I really did something big and no one ever did it. No one ever bought it. No one even knows that what I did. So they had, I think, a real vision to bring in someone who knew how to scale a business, and he brought me in not so long ago.
Wow. So you that was a very unique situation because I can tell you in my startup experience, and it's more than just a few, just the opposite. It was the board or the investors that has essentially mandated a suit to come in and run the thing, and most of the founders did not like that. So let's move into your present company, John, and talk a little bit about um, Unitary Braid Division Multiplexing. It's said that it provides a fundamentally secure communications. Is this a known thing in wireless, or did you guys invent this on your own?
Yeah, this is the name, as the founders will tell you, is meaningless. They came up with it. It doesn't describe it. It's not based on something. This is a string theorist and a computer scientist slash field operative coming up with probably a terrible name, UBDM. But here's what it is. What they did, they looked at 80 years. How far back do you have to go for Claude Shannon? Late 40s or 50s, I guess. So more than 70 years. Invented information theory. Basically, you know, as I tell, you know, you tell your mom, ones and zeros. He didn't invent ones and zeros, but he invented the idea really of taking analog information and digitizing it, created the whole information and computer age. And radio was kind of built on that. What these guys realized is that all the innovation that had happened for those 70 years, not people on this call will be able to call me out and say, well, not all of it, John, but that's true. Nearly all was done by electrical engineers and people that worked at the higher layers in the OSI stack. They're working on the media layer, they're working on the application layer. This guy was a physicist. He goes, I don't know how to do that. I work at the physical layer. And what they did is they said, instead of encrypting the information in a radio communication, I'm going to encrypt the waveform itself. I'm going to do it right at the physical layer. And when I've spoken to PhD physicists who really know what they're talking about, they'll say, you can't encrypt a waveform, John. I'll say, okay, that's how I describe it. That's my shorthand. You're encrypting the symbols. And not too many people know what that means. I certainly wasn't one of the people that understood that, but what you're encrypting is the symbols. Effectively, though, the entire waveform of a radio communication is encrypted so that the enemy, the opponent, not only can't they decrypt it with quantum computing or AI or anything else, but you can mathematically prove that they never will be able to. And when we talked about reverse engineering technology, and this person from this government agency said, could I reverse engineer it? The second part to that answer was also that if the enemy reverse engineered it, if they had our source code, it would still be robust until they got the key. They can't get the key from us. So even if they know how we do it and what we're doing, it's cryptographically secure. And this was a breakthrough. This was something that no one had ever done. And we find when we get into a presentation, we were raising money recently, doing our Series A. When we get smart audiences, people that are big in, people from the government, people from NSA, people from CIA, wherever, they would say, so you're using spread spectrum and frequency hopping, or using obscuring, and no, we don't do any of that. And they start to get mad. They say, well, what do you mean? Well, how else? Of course you do. Well, no, we don't do any of that. And they're like, they're looking at their watches, like, we set up a whole hour. How do we get out of this meeting? And as they start to explain the idea of encrypting at the physical layer, and people say, well, does it work? So, MITRE vetted it. It works. Here, take the kid home and try it. Have your guys put on the headphones and bring out their oscilloscopes and see what they can intercept. It's always an exciting thing when people see this, that this is something significant. I think the readings I saw showed that polar codes had a 0.9 decibel improvement over LDPC. So 5G was one with a 0.9 decibel gain. And this is a 3.7 decibel gain, which is almost like a side effect. Not even the intention originally of this technology was that it gives you between 3 and 6 decibel gain on your comms also. So it's a very exciting thing to have, mainly focused on defense and intel. But we look down the road and say that the improvement in throughput, we'll look at commercial markets in a few years.
Wow. So this is revolutionary, not evolutionary, it would sound like. This is breaking a lot of paradigms, it sounds like, because these other folks couldn't even process it, right? It wasn't something that they could relate to. And what I heard you say was you're encrypting the waveform in some way, or let's see what yeah. Yeah, encrypting the waveform, and then because it's encryption, you need a key, and you don't, even if you know how to encrypt it, you don't have the key to decrypt it. So that's very powerful. So you make a statement on the website about the attack surface has been eliminated. Can you explain this a little bit more?
Sure. The typical way, you look at what's going on, the front page story in today's New York Times about Ukrainian drones versus Russia. And the Ukrainians were saying, I was sitting in a meeting discussing how to secure drones, and I had my computer open and I had the Times open, and I said, "Oh, guys, let's just take a minute here and see what the New York Times is saying about our conversation right now." Ukrainians send the drones over into Russia. Russians jam them. They barrage jam them. And then the Russians also learned, by the way, that if they barrage jam the drones, they can't command their own troops to advance. So they have the effect of stopping the Russians anyway, even though the drones weren't working. Then the Ukrainians come up with more clever ways to secure the drone comms, and the Russians come up with a countermeasure. Ukrainians uh, start sending it off GPS navigation. Russians jam the GPS. Ukrainians send it off dead reckoning when the GPS gets jammed. So then the Russians spoof the GPS so it looks like it's not jammed, but they turn it upside down and they crash the drones into mountainsides because they don't revert to dead reckoning because they're still getting a good GPS signal. It's just as inaccurate. So this is all going on. The attack surface there is a control plane for the drones. Tactical field radios. These are all part of the attack surface. Internet of Things, every two devices that are sending a signal become part of the attack surface. And you can encrypt it. You can use type 1 encryption, which gives some level of protection. AES encryption is really powerful. That's quantum proof. It's end to end, but it doesn't protect everything. It doesn't protect, for example, the metadata. So what we found is that when you're sending a signal, the enemy would say, okay, we see someone using a tactical radio here in Ukraine, but the message is all encrypted. We can't tell what they're saying. I say, well, what can you tell? Well, we can tell it's a $28,000 Harris radio. We recognize the transmitter code. That same radio was in Syria 2 years ago. It was being used by a special operations guy who was talking to headquarters. And he was doing a voice communications with them. We don't know what he said. It's all encrypted. And then he was doing a GPS location. Then he started streaming video. And 5 minutes later, the bridge he was next to blew up. Now he's here in Ukraine. He's still encrypted, but we have the metadata. So what do we know? We know it's the same radio that was down there. It's probably the same person. They don't hand the radios around. We know that he was just having a voice conversation with Special Operations Command. It's encrypted, so we don't know what's in the message. We don't care. I can't tell you how many SIGINT people say, I don't care what the payload is. I don't care what the content is. What I care about is who's having the conversation, who are they talking to? And when that guy sends a GPS location, I know what the location is because I know where he is. I can still geolocate the person. And I know he's about to start streaming video, and the fuel depot that he's next to is going to blow up unless I send a missile in right now. So that person is now worth a $100,000 response. Whereas if it was just a radio that wasn't of any interest, we wouldn't bother. So this idea of all these things they can get a hold of for SIGINT purposes goes away because now they say someone is on a radio. That's all we know is that there's a radio there. We don't know who, we don't know what, we don't know if it's voice or video. We don't know what we can't even tell the preamble on some of this now. All we know is, in fact, in some cases, all we know is that there's energy. Because when the guys at the company said, well, we can make the radios all but invisible, I said, guys, it's a radio. It puts out energy. They said, yeah, but if it looks like Gaussian noise, is the enemy really going to spend $100,000 when it may just be someone starting their car or running a fluorescent light or turning on a ceiling fan? Because it's just electromagnetic radiation. It's all, it looks like nothing. The big globe of dots, not the 4x4 matrices that say that something human is happening here. So this gets, when you take away anything to sink your teeth into, it really gets very interesting about what you can do as far as stealth and security.
That is fascinating. So this sounds like, as we said, revolutionary. How do you keep this from the bad guys? Because I assume that most of the applications are going to be military, law enforcement, security services, that sort of thing.
That's right. And I was consulting after Wireless Wars came out. I was doing some consulting to companies, and one tech firm asked me, how do we keep from being hacked by China? And I actually happen to know that they had already been hacked by China. I don't know if they were keeping it from me or if they didn't know themselves, but I know that they had been hacked because they did test and measurement work, and they had access to all sorts of metadata on their clients. They didn't have the call content information, but they knew a ton of information. And I said, guys, China has the F-35 plans. If they can get that, then they can get anything. You know, my head of security, this is my phone, and he said, "Sorry, John, you're gonna have to start carrying two phones now. This one is locked down so tight that you won't respond to phishing and spoofing on it. You do little things like that. We keep all of our real information is air gapped, so our website doesn't give you a pathway in. Our email doesn't give you a pathway into our code. We work very closely on our hiring to screen people, even going to polygraph and so on to make sure. I shouldn't say make sure. We don't have any delusions. Our view is that they will eventually get penetration here. And in fact, a fallen radio, someone figures out and they want to spend 50 or 100,000 hours of world-class time on it, you know, it's all vulnerable. And so you just got to then stay one step ahead after that.
Understood. Understood. By the way, in addition to your book, I did a book report for RCA. I think it appeared in a recent proceedings. Tell me how this is how the world ends. And it was a kind of a bookend to your book. And having read both of them, I got very frightened, and I have some security background. So basically, what she said was everybody's been hacked in the story. And if you think you haven't been hacked, then you just don't know, which is what you just said.
Yep.
So we're going to
Again,
change. Oh, so go ahead. Yeah, yeah,
I was
please.
just going to say I have a quote. I don't know if it was Mitnick in one of my chapter quotes. It says there's two types of people in the world: those who have been hacked and those who don't realize yet that they've been hacked. You know, that's all there is. Everyone's been you know, anyone that's worth looking at has been looked at by now, and there's really no way to avoid that. It's you just got to stay ahead as best you can.
Yeah, I completely agree. Barney, I hope you're there because we're going to approach you in a second here. I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, the next interview is going to be on Tuesday, the 11th of June. We do these every 3 months. I've already got somebody lined up for that. I think you'll find that interview also interesting, as these others have been. Like John's previous interview, this interview will appear on the RCA YouTube channel in a week or two once Amy gets it edited down and so forth. So it'll be there for others who have missed this. You want to pass on the word that this was an interesting interview. You'll be able to let them see that. RCA will be at IWCE, and there's an event on Wednesday of March 27th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Cavas Tacos. It's a RCA Fiesta. So if you're going to be at IWCE, please join us. And also the next day on Thursday from 7:30 a.m. to 8:45 in the Tangerine Ballroom 4, there's going to be a Women in Wireless presentation. And then almost right after, we're going to be at the WIA convention at booth 729 at the Georgia World Congress Center. So RCA is moving around again like they did last year. So please join us. Okay, Barney, we've got a few questions and comments. Why don't we start with you picking one of those and off we go.
Okay, thank you, John. And John, you may have sort of answered this already, but it did pop up. How do you win in patent protection against an adversary that does not care about your laws and beating you is a religious justification?
Yeah, one of the things I argue in wireless wars is that you don't do this the way you would in a business dispute. You know, when we were dealing in the Great Wars in World War II, you wouldn't be taking the Germans to court. You had to realize it was a war. So if someone's violating your IP, you do things like we've actually done. You say, you can't sell your stuff in this country anymore, and you can't buy your inputs from us anymore. That's a lousy business model. And I think this is one of the problems. Department of Commerce is charged with basically enforcing this. And if you look at their website, Department of Commerce, their mission is to increase jobs and aid the prosperity of American businesses. So it's saying you can't sell into the biggest market and you can't make your stuff in the cheapest manufacturing base. That really hurts American businesses. But the IP theft needs that type of response, saying, okay, Huawei, you're banned from, the free world selling into countries like this. Again, lousy business, but when it's not really business, you can't handle it like it's a legal dispute. You have to look at it as a geopolitical fight and just literally cut off entire countries from the market.
Thank you. The next question brings up AI, and it's a two-part question. I'll take it one at a time. And this is what your forecast is for the impact of artificial intelligence on wireless communications in terms, first, of efficiencies.
It's funny. This just came up today for the first time. We had a really funny conversation about it. We were John, you're asking me, how do you make a mark as a smaller company? We said, well, we're quantum proof. Okay, well, everyone says they're quantum proof right now. Say, well, we don't use AI to do what we're doing. A lot of the companies in the business say, we use AI to frequency hop and spread the spectrum. We do all these clever things. Well, we don't, because we're kind of a layer below that. You don't need to use AI. The whole waveform's encrypted. And so we were sitting around in a marketing meeting saying, well, how do we play this? Because people keep asking us, what about AI? So here's what our answer was. AI will not defeat our system. We are AI proof. I'm like, oh, well, that's really cool. You guys are AI resistant. I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever used the term. It is true that AI, well, nothing works if you're not really, if there's no attack surface, then AI or no AI, you're still going to be secure. So we describe ourselves as AI resistant now. But for the most part, the way the industry is moving, this is a big deal. The best methods to say hide radio comms, where you hide down in the noise, AI sees right through it. There's patterns that are not normal and random, that can be random generated, but AI gets to look at that and say, it looks random. We know the random generator you must have used because we see the pattern, the random pattern. It's not really, really random. So AI is going to be very important in basically piercing the security of most systems. And we even look at for our stuff, which we consider completely impervious, to say, well, maybe the patterns of Gaussian noise being released will look unnatural. Maybe that becomes a vulnerability where AI actually can say, we can't tell it's a radio, but we can tell something is happening. We can tell the energy releases are not natural and they're not background noise. So I do agree that is really important. In China, the good news is, I talk about this in Wireless Wars too, AI is being led by really, really deep disruptive thinkers. And I won't say that China doesn't produce them, but if they stay in the Chinese market, the bad fates await them. Jack Ma was one of the deepest thinkers in Chinese technology, founder of ByteDance and Ant and all these other companies, and they ended him. He made one comment that got out of line from the administration, and they said, we're canceling your IPOs, we're shutting your business school, and you're going to be playing golf in Thailand. Just be glad we didn't kill you. We're putting you in jail for life. So American AI culturally is going to be superior. And by the way, let me again be clear. About half the people doing it weren't born in America, but they're in an environment that is far more permissive to disruptive thinking. So they come from all over the world, including from China and from all over the world. And we're doing better things in AI for now. If we don't squash it, I mean, we can still ruin that too if we start cracking down and saying fall in line and do it the way industry or the government wants you to do it.
I think you almost answered the second part of that question as much as the first part, because the second part was AI in terms of secure transmission and reverse hacking, which you sort of did get into. Next question I see here, what is your perspective on how vulnerable to another 9/11 or worse attack as a result of our politically deliberate open southern border?
Yeah, this is one of these paradoxes. China, I've read demographic studies, credible studies that say that China, by the end of this century, may be below 500 million people. And that sounds crazy for 1.2 billion population, but they're down to about one child or fewer per couple. So it won't take that long before the population falls in half. America has a low birth rate. Immigration into America is a great strength. There's not many countries in the world that can say, how many people do we want? Okay, open the doors, and when we get to the number we want, we close them again. We can do that. We can take as many people as we want because everyone wants to come here. In my view, the way it's being done, which is where we don't get to pick, we want some workers, we want some scientists, we want some doctors, we want some carpenters, we want all sorts of people that contribute to society. When they're just coming through, in my view, unchecked, some of the enemies, including China, I don't know how you get to the Mexican-Texas border from Shenzhen, but there's 20,000 or so, mostly military aged and mostly men, that have entered in the past year or so. That does concern me, because this should be a great source of strength for us if we were to manage this properly. That's just my take.
Well, that's what we're here to hear your take. The next one talks about global standards and commenting that the decline of U.S. and Western leadership in global standards and being overtaken by China, in part by the investment of the Chinese government and focusing on standards leadership. What do you think? What direction do you believe that's going?
This
And
is
how
a
do we
real
change
problem.
that?
Changing it is going to be trickier. The standards communities, for anyone who's ever worked in the standards groups, 3GPP or any of the other ones, I look at that as dark art. I don't understand it. You got to be so smart and you got to be so patient playing those games. And the people that Lucent used to send, I was like, God, you're sending this person away. They could be inventing all this great stuff for us. They say, no, they can do more good with their brain in the standards group than anywhere else. Because if you tweak a standard, they're going to be in there. Look, it's supposedly an academic exercise to a great extent, but there's elbows being thrown. People are trying to advocate for what they think on an academic argument, but things obviously that they feel is going to help their company. But there's has to pass the red face test, that you can't advocate for something in front of your peers that they know makes no sense at all except to help your company. So you got to stay within a realm. What China has done, the CCP has flooded the zone with people that are in all the key roles in the standards groups now. And what you'll see some odd behavior, like suddenly ZTE will lay its argument down and line up with Xiaomi or line up with Huawei. You say, you're a ferocious competitor to those guys. I know they might all be Chinese companies, but they compete ferociously. All of a sudden, they all kind of get quiet and all fall in line behind a single point of view. And we know that the word went out saying, this is what you will do. It's not how the committees are supposed to work. So I think it's a real problem that there's people that are playing by the different rule, and how to fix it. I spoke to the head of one of the standards groups. He said, I'd love to bar people from communist China from holding key positions. It is un-American to do that. He says, how do we look at him and say, wait, you come from Shanghai, you can't lead this committee. He says, and so we don't do that. They're running it, they're in key roles. And from what I'm hearing, I haven't heard a fix to this yet, because to do the things that might solve it, you start to lose what makes us special, which is that we're pluralistic here in a way that China, ironically, is not. There's no American-born people running any Chinese companies. There's a lot of Chinese-born people running great American companies, and that's what makes us great. And if we become like the Chinese Communist Party, then you kind of wonder, what are we trying to fight for there in the first place?
To sort of move off in a different direction, since I'm trying to follow the questions here, you had mentioned a little bit earlier about commercial or non-military use of your technology. Do you see, what do you see in the future of that? I mean, we have some encryption now in public service area. Do you see your technology eventually ending up in more day-to-day communication?
I do. I think probably the places it would end up would be in securing Wi-Fi, which is maybe apart from Bluetooth, the least secure, a terribly insecure medium that's increasingly being used. And if it had level of security like 5G, I think it could have a lot more applications. Uh, Private networks, so corporate campuses that are sending sensitive information that need to really, really secure them in better ways than you can through current technology. I think the gain improvements are going to be important in satellite space, because more and more the people I talk to on everything from backhaul to rural access talk about satellites. And you saw Starlink lost out on a rural broadband bid because they don't have the throughput on Starlink to serve an entire community with local satellites. But if you could double or quadruple or 6 or 8 times the throughput, apart from the security elements, this suddenly makes satellite communications a more viable solution going into the future, where you need gig speeds, and satellite hasn't traditionally been very good for that.
I feel like, John, you're asking or answering the second question that I was going to ask you. I don't know whether you're reading my mind or you just know what's coming. But the second part of that, as you were talking about, is how your technology would affect, in a sense, non-encrypted communication. And it sounds like there is some potential there.
Yeah, I think so. And on the security aspect, the one other area, you get great ideas and they get shot down by people that think better. I said, why don't we do this for medical devices? There was a famous story, which is a true story, that when Dick Cheney got his pacemaker, they deactivated the wireless link in it because someone could have used it to turn it off. And I said, well, why don't we put this into all these wireless devices, diabetic, insulin pumps, pacemakers? And a person who's a senior Intel officer with great technical chops said, if you wanted to disrupt someone's wireless device, you would do it through the core, the servers. You would do it at the network. You wouldn't want to be physically present where you literally have to get in front of the signal. It's so much harder to do it that way. And it's so easy to do it through the typical hack. And there's no great solutions coming down the pike to secure servers against bad actors. So I think applying security to things like medical devices and all those things, it seemed like a great idea. It's probably not that powerful a thought, but there are applications in factories and military bases and so on where there'll be a value.
I see a couple of questions concerning, again, the issues with China. But before we get on to that or back to that topic, I think a better question that comes up here is, how would someone with a wireless background get involved in wireless security in a future career?
It's funny. I had always wanted to do it. I was a wireless guy, and I found this startup called Palantir some years ago. And I said, Palantir, I think you guys have some pretty cool stuff. I'd love to come work for you. And they said, you got a nice resume, but you have no background in security, in defense, and intel. And they said no, and which is a shame for me. I think my stock options, over the next 10 or 15 years would have been very nice. But the funny thing is, when I wrote this book, which pulled me into the security space, I met this FBI counter intel officer who said, "Hey, John, you know where Huawei is selling its gear in the US?" And I said, nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, Montana, North Dakota, mom and pop, family-owned carriers. He said, you know what's out there? I said, well, I was just out of Montana. It's beautiful. There's nothing out there. He said, all of our nuclear missile bases. They're surrounded by Huawei. Huawei is sold into all of those bases. And it turns out it was true. I wrote about it in the book, but by writing about it and then spending months researching it, the book pulled me into it. So one answer is write a book, get lucky, find a publisher, and have people read it, and suddenly you'll get pulled into a career in wireless security. The other answer I would give, though, is if you got good technical chops, first of all, you can get a job. Places like the NSA, the Applied Physics Lab at Hopkins, and the national labs, they're looking for really talented people. Now, I should say people that haven't smoked marijuana or used drugs, even in states where it's legal, because that's still the rules, you know. I got a son who's applying for his security clearance. He's the only college kid that I can think of that definitely hasn't even smoked marijuana because I said, no one may care about it, but when they strap you down to that machine and they start asking you questions, you want to work for the government with the security clearance, you got to do that. But all these places are hiring people with good backgrounds in wireless. And you go from that, if you want to go from the NSA or the APL into industry and wireless security, that is a pretty good jump to make. And they're always looking for talent out of the government agencies.
Another one popped up here. There was a big area of concern. The previous telecom cyber security team that he was involved with. Part of the problem is individual devices are designed with ease of use, not security in mind.
Well, that's right. The whole internet was designed with ease of use, not security in mind. I don't know if I'd mentioned on the last call, just before I wrote the book, I was at a cocktail party in McLean, Virginia, and I was talking to some older man. And he said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm thinking of writing a book." And I'm describing how networks are secured. And I said, "A server, which is really just a computer." And he said, "I know what a server is." Okay, I didn't know. And he starts telling me about how Run Zhongfei, the chairman of Huawei, had called him the other day. And I said, "Do you have a business card? Why are you talking to the chairman of Huawei? Who are you?" And he was Bob Kahn, who a lot of people would credit with inventing the internet. He was the DARPA guy who proposed an idea for a network of networks. This was a good omen for me that I ran into him at a cocktail party a few years ago. And, his work, his invention was not built as a secure solution. It was just built as a way to connect government networks to each other. And as it became more populated, security became not just an afterthought. It's almost impossible to bolt that on now.
Another one talks again about a concern of China, I guess, is do you have a concern? Because here we have China recently in the world of electric cars is exceeding and increasing their output and lowering prices, not only in vehicles, cell phones, and the rest of the world combined. Just recently exceeded creating more patents than the rest of the world. Is that an issue, and is that a concern in your mind?
I actually started to do research on exactly that topic, and I have not. With this job, I've been pulled in so much. If I was writing a second book, that's one of the topics I was going to address. Here's my take on it, and don't hold me to this because I have not completed vetting this, but my thinking is the people at the ministry said we need more patents in China, both for invention and for lawfare. We want to be able to go sue everyone who's really inventing stuff, and we just need some basis. And the Chinese workers have been taught well to game the system. So if they're told, all right, we'll give you $500 for every patent, $1,000 for every patent, they'll start filing patents right and left, empty patents, weak patents. My understanding is these are not big, important patents. These are quantity, not quality. And I have some evidence to that effect. So I'm less concerned, but I will caveat that some people in the business, the Chinese analysts, some of them are concerned about this. Mostly, though, they're not businessmen, they're China experts. So they've got a different expertise than I do.
There's been a lot of talk about enforcing patents. Do you have any knowledge? The question came up here. Do the Chinese internally protect their own patents? Or do they not worry about their own patents like they tend not to worry about our patents?
It's a good question. I know that the competition between Chinese companies is ferocious. Like I said, ZTE and Huawei hate each other. They lock their stuff up so that they can't get, no one will break into their offices and steal their IP from the company down the street. Do they do that in the field of IP, though? My impression is it's not, it's just in general not as protected in China. But Huawei has patents that ZTE can't touch, so I think they may respect them at least internally, just to keep order.
Well, John, I think I've run out of the non-duplicating questions here.
Yeah, you did a great job, Barney. Thank you very much. And thanks to the audience for coming up with some really insightful questions. I hope you all enjoyed this. I would welcome you to send suggestions to Amy for me about future topics or people to interview, because we're always looking for ideas. I don't feel like I have a corner on that. And finally, I want to remind you that this year we're going to be back in New York City in November on the 23rd, excuse me, the 22nd and 23rd, Friday and Saturday, for our annual meeting, our dinner meeting, and the technical symposium. And Dr. Jim Breakall, who's in charge of that, is lining up speakers. So please consider joining us. Many of you on the east part of the U.S. Have always enjoyed coming to New York City just before Christmas time, and taking a holiday show or any kind of Broadway show. Just watch out for the ticket prices. Everybody take care. Thank you very much. And thank you, John, and thank you, Barney.